Thank you, James. Yeah, thanks. And as promised, I'm Stuart Varrall. And yeah, we'll be talking about Swift Playgrounds and how I think it's better than Xcode for many things that you may be doing. Yes, I've been developing mobile apps for a long time, since pre-iPhone. Apple's claim that the 70-30 split was a good deal. It was true. If anyone had to deal with carriers and publishers before iPhone, it used to be a lot harder. Insert a scene of a man climbing through the snow. It used to be bad. But I'm not here to talk about the past because Adam did such a great job of doing that yesterday. So here we're looking at what's current and hopefully what's the future. So let's start from the top. What is Swift Playgrounds? There's a lot of confusion about what Swift Playgrounds is. You may have heard of it, but may not know what it actually entails. So first and foremost, it's an educational tool. This is how it's promoted. This is all the marketing material. This is all the slides of WWDC that you'll see. They focus on it being an educational tool. It's great for this. So people who are new to programming, people who are new to Swift programming, Apple provides a series of workbooks and tutorials to take you through from the very basics of what even programming is through to being able to develop an actual application. And it's got all of that content. They provide a whole host of stuff. They update it every year with the latest Swift side of things. And they do it to a point where at the beginning you don't even know you're programming. You're controlling this little dude walking around. It's a game. It's entertainment. Great for kids. If you've got young kids and want to introduce them to programming, then this is a great tool for them. They'll think they're playing a game, but actually they'll be learning. Apple provides lots of workbooks. You can also download workbooks from other sources to extend this even more, or you can create your own. So you can actually go in and create your own interactive workbooks so that you can either teach someone coding or to show them interactively how your package or how your software works. And this is something that Apple started introducing and something that maybe people should start looking at more. You can import your package and show interactively through code, through examples, how it works in the real world. So it's definitely something worth looking at. Playgrounds is also a place to experiment. And this is what it used to be. So you have a scratch pad where you can write code and run it interactively in parts so that you can test different concepts and play around with different things. So this is where the other side that you may be familiar with Playgrounds and how it works. But things have moved on a lot further from that. But one thing I would like to point out, this is a great way of showing code and demo stuff in slides, in presentations, because you can interactively run different bits of code as you go. So yeah, well worth checking out if you've got a presentation coming up. But what I want to focus on is the fact that Swift Playgrounds is actually a full-blown IDE. You can create applications within Swift Playgrounds and release them to the App Store. It allows you to write Swift UI code. You can import AppKit code, UIKit code if you wish, and you can run this on an iPad, a Mac, and you have full access to the majority of the frameworks and things within Swift. No Objective-C, though, to point out. Sorry, Adam. And by full IDE, I mean it. Like you can go from idea through to App Store Connect with a one click of a button. And this is available on iPad or Mac. So from an iPad, you can release an application straight to the App Store. Very powerful. Not many people know that that's possible. But this is sort of the area that we're going to focus on today. And from App Store Connect, it can go straight through to either within there in a holding pattern, so you can then release it to the store, or it can go straight to Xcode. Straight to TestFlight. So you can release your applications, test them interactively straight from there, and it is literally one button click. I was going to show a screenshot animation of what was happening, but I clicked a button, this popped up, and it was gone. So it seemed a bit pointless. So when you create a new Swift Playground, what are you actually creating? Well, it's a package, a special type of package in a folder. When you create a new one, there's 3 files that are created. One, package.swift. It's based on Apple's Swift packager. And it's a very simple, it sets a few variables, dictates various things within the application, but it's a few dozen lines of code, and that's it. That's all you need. You also get a main.swift file, so this is your entry point into an application. If you've worked on Swift UI, you'll know exactly what that looks like. And by default, there's a single view which is created, but you can place as many other views and resources into this package, into this folder, into the playground as you wish, and it's all self-contained and nicely packaged up. If you've ever worked or had any issues with syncing or conflicts with Xcode projects and know how complicated and confusing they can be, this is a completely different side from now, and this is kind of where I see that Apple's going with their development side of things. So for example, a brand new Swift Playgrounds project is 45 lines long of this package.swift compared to 350 lines before you've even done anything with Xcode project. It's fully editable, source controllable, etc., and a lot more friendly to work with. Importantly, Swift Playground packages can also include other packages. So you can start with a single package and include as many smaller, larger packages as you like. The only limitation currently is those packages have to be public in some way, or you have to have a public Git URL to access them. But I can't see that staying around for long, but that's something to bear in mind. So that's some of the information about what Playgrounds is, but what is it not? Well, it's not Xcode. It doesn't have all the features that Xcode does. Xcode comes with a lot of bloat, so maybe that's not such a bad thing, but you can't do many of the things you can do in Xcode. So Xcode's not going away anytime soon. Importantly, it's also not an Xcode playground. Very confusing. Two things called basically the same thing. If you go File, New Playground within Xcode, you get the Scratchpad version. So the basic interactive version. You don't get the ability to run your own applications or fully develop things that way. So if that's the way you get into this, don't, because that's not the same thing. There's a few things that it doesn't have. There's no full debugger. It's back to print statement debugging. There's no instruments. There's none of the sort of complexity that comes with some of the things that you get with Xcode. But one of the main limitations is there's no XC test. So you can't write tests, unit tests, UI tests, or anything with the applications. This is one of the big limitations, and hopefully something that I hope that they change or improve on soon. There's no version control inbuilt, and when I wrote these slides, this was sort of a big limitation to me, until I realized that I actually don't use the inbuilt Xcode version control anyway. I use a separate program. So it's the same with this. So you can drag the Swift package into a Git client, and it will treat it like a full project, and you can work with it that way. So I use working copy on the iPad for doing that, and it works tremendously well and keeps everything in sync. So maybe not such a limitation. Currently only supports the platforms which the Swift Playgrounds app runs on. So runs on iPad OS, so you can develop for that and iOS simultaneously, and it runs applications on a Mac via Mac Catalyst. So if you're developing on an iPad, you can also release to the Mac and vice versa, but you don't get access to running on the watch. You can't write an Apple TV application, and currently you can't write a Vision Pro application either. But one thing it's also not is work. Or at least it doesn't feel like work to me. So I do most of my Playgrounds development on an iPad. And the context switching, going from a laptop with full Xcode, 2 monitors side by side, to be able to sit on my couch with an iPad, or if I'm being serious, then I can then also connect the iPad up to the screens and do full screen sharing. But just that fact, it's a different context, doing something differently, just has that different connotation to me in terms of what it is I'm actually doing, and it just doesn't feel like work. But it's not only me that thinks that. Josh from Apple, when introducing Swift Playgrounds, said it's just so much fun, and I agree with him. It's just different. So Swift Playgrounds, to me, is like Xcode on easy mode. So what are the kind of benefits that you get? I've mentioned that you can run it on an iPad and a Mac, and so you can use a single Swift Playgrounds application, pick up your development on either platform. The code syncs via iCloud, so mostly works, sometimes doesn't for unknown reasons. But you can pick up an application and work on the same application across the two platforms. But the main thing where I see the improvements is just speed of iteration. Because when you're running the playgrounds on an iPad and you're previewing the application, it's running natively. There's no simulator involved. It's not having to spin up things in the background. It's just building and running your application as you go. So the speed at which you can develop, it's basically like SwiftUI previews, but on steroids. It just feels like another level of interactivity and unlocks productivity for me. But importantly with this, you're not just previewing a view, you're previewing a full application. So as you're making changes, it's rebuilding and relaunching the application in basically real time. So here I am making some changes to a view. I'm changing some colors to different colors in here. And this is the full application that's being rebuilt and reloaded. So I'm not just previewing a view, like sub-view down the line of my application. The whole thing is, in this case, it's bringing data down from an API and formatting it and doing lots of things. So the speed at which this is all happening is pretty phenomenal. In this situation, I realized, having watched a great talk yesterday on connaissance, that I shouldn't really be changing the colors throughout the application as I go. So change the whole accent color of the application. That triggers a full rebuild of the application, so almost like a clean and build from the Xcode terms. And you can see it takes a couple of seconds as opposed to instant. So the difference there is really minimal. And one of the other things that Playgrounds brings is just a nice new look and interface. Everything's touch friendly. It works perfectly well on an iPad. I would still recommend that you use a keyboard if you're doing any development on an iPad. It's just so much faster and easier. But there's things in here which is sort of touch native and just works really well. It doesn't feel as bogged down and as complicated. A beginner can open this app and make sense of what's going on, but there's also enough features in there that an advanced developer can get in and unlock some great productivity through what it provides. And one of the other things it has is inbuilt accessibility. I've managed to hide the accessibility thing in there. There we go. So here's an application running in Playgrounds. It's just in preview mode there. If I make changes to accessibility settings on my iPad, that's automatically reflected to the application that I've got running. So you're not having to simulate what accessibility changes are happening. You can see them getting updated and changed in real time. And so everything you're doing is reflected with those things. It's a really powerful way of making sure that your apps are accessible and allows you to sort of do that from the beginning. It's not something you do at a later stage. It's something that you can keep an eye on and maintain as you're going along. And so there's lots of broad capabilities and things that you can do within Playgrounds. Some of the things that you can add are listed here, and there's a lot. And we're not just talking about simple applications, just view-based applications. You can go in to get the hardware, getting access to the camera, the Bluetooth. If anyone saw the Bluetooth session yesterday, you can get full access to the Bluetooth side of things. So there's a lot that these functionality and capabilities unlock. There's a lot it can't do. You can't do anything with widgets currently. You can't do anything with background mode. So there's limitations which will impact the types of applications that you can develop, but also there's a lot that you can still do with what it does. And whilst we're on capabilities, this is the interface that they provide to add new capabilities. So the list of things here. You don't have to go and Google obscure plist side of things to figure out exactly what you need to add to access the camera. Everything's through this nice welcoming interface. It describes at each stage exactly what you need to add and why you're adding the things. So if anything, Xcode needs to add this, but it's so much more accessible. And the same for lots of other things within SwiftUI. If you're adding symbols, you get the preview of the symbol with the colors and everything in there. Adding new colors and things to your application. It's all very touch focused, all very accessible for people who don't know what they're doing, but also powerful enough that you can use it as an advanced developer. So there's lots of kind of on the background of what Swift UI playgrounds are and what it is, but in practice, what can you actually do with it? So I've got 3 different examples here of applications that I've built, and each of them sort of highlights something that is a great thing that Playgrounds offers that you may not either appreciate or hopefully just sort of opens up some ideas as to how you might use it. So the first one is a very simple application. It came out of a car journey I was on with my kids. Tried to solve a simple problem, which was my kids were being very annoying, and they were arguing about which color cars they'd spotted on this journey, the game that they play. And so I whipped out my iPad and developed this application with their help so they could track the colors of the rainbow that they were spotting in the cars. So I literally built this app on the go. Within a few minutes, I had something that I could hand to them and get them to test. And then over the course of the journey, we built up this application. Very simple, and this is kind of the limit of what you may consider a Swift Playgrounds can do. But we'll go through some other examples now of what more can be done. The reason why this is a good example is I literally didn't have my laptop with me on this journey. I was on a family holiday, but I did have my iPad. And because of the syncing between the iCloud side of things, even though I developed it on one iPad, I could then pass it off to the other iPads, and everyone had access to the application at the same time. So no more arguing, or at least for 10 minutes. So this is an example of more of a complete application that you see. So I had a problem with the applications that I found for following cricket games. I wanted to scratch my own itch, particularly the worm view there is something that I felt was integral to following a game and how close a game was at any time. And none of the applications that I found had that easily accessible. They all buried that in 20 clicks down the line or over 20 different adverts you had to click through. So I built this application over the course of a few months for myself, but I built it primarily on the iPad. So it was a sort of evening and weekend type thing. It was something that I enjoyed doing, but it isn't a toy application. It's a fully fledged application. It works across iPad and iOS. It's fully adaptable, has multiple screens, some complex logic with the data side of things, pulling in different things from APIs. It fully supports the observable macros and other new advanced features that are only released recently. So something that was something that you may not consider as what could be done in Playgrounds, but something that is completely possible and very easy to do. And particularly with the speed of iteration, being able to try different things in this, different colors, different layouts. It's all something that obviously you can do this in Xcode, but the context switching and me being able to do it as a toy project, was something I really enjoyed doing. Now, ultimately, I did transition this to Xcode, primarily to support the Vision Pro. You cannot do any Vision Pro developments in Playgrounds at the moment. And what I was able to do was take the majority of the code I'd already written and import that into the Xcode project, add adaptations for multiple window supports and 3D and lots of different, if Vision OS do this with the layouts and the colors and different things with the materials. But ultimately, the core of the project remained the same as what I developed on the iPad and in Swift Playgrounds. Now, I know you may be thinking, here I am trying to convince you that Playgrounds is great, but then also admitting that, no, I had to use Xcode for this project. But for me, the fact you can take the same project and progress it through is a feature, not a limitation. And so the same application can be opened in Swift Playgrounds on iPad and on the Mac. And even with Xcode, Xcode has full support for opening a Swift Playgrounds project, and it gives you that extra ability to do debugging and some of the additional error handling and things that you might not be able to do. But also it's then easy to take that playground and use it fully fledged within an Xcode project, and which then allows you to add additional features and additional targets and things in there. If I was clever, what I would have done is actually package up the code I'd written as a playground into a package and then imported that into an Xcode project, and then I could have still kept them separate. I wasn't that clever and ended up copying it all across, but that's definitely a way that you can make this even more extensible and still keep the sort of separation of concerns there and give you the best of both worlds. And then finally, a much more complex application and something that I didn't even realize was possible when I started out doing it, but an area where I think Playgrounds actually shines the most because it has integration with the device and the camera and things on the device itself. So I play golf, or at least try to play golf, and I've also got this issue of I think that there's a software problem to all of my issues. And so when I wanted to get better at golf, my solution was to develop an application to help me get better at golf, obviously. And in the age that we are, obviously it needed to include AI as well. So I built a CoreML model which could detect a ball, a hole, and the putter. Was able to create the CoreML project, CoreML package in Xcode, export that and bring that into Swift Playgrounds. It needed a few tweaks to the dependencies and things that were included, but that all worked fine. In Playgrounds, I got access to the camera, AR kit, and put all these things together. And so I could use the device to detect where everything was and do calculations on how far away the ball was from the hole. Unfortunately, that was mostly more than 0. And add all this into something where I could develop and test on the single device. Now, I don't know whether any of you have done any in-the-field developments with some software, but it's very difficult when you're out and about with a laptop and cables and devices and trying to make updates and test. Here you've got everything in the single package. I could make a change on the iPad, pick it up, move it around, and do that instantly. There's no delays. There's no syncing of projects over Wi-Fi, build and run and all that kind of stuff. It's just instant. It just works there again. So this fast iteration time and the ability to make changes on the fly and then immediately see what impact they have was a big win for this project. And as a bonus, I also added hand detection because I thought that if I knew what my hands were doing, I could then have more understanding of why I was missing certain putts. And obviously that didn't work because it wasn't anything to do with software that was causing my problems. And then finally added core motion support. So by using the AirPods, I could detect my head movement at the same time. And all of this was all feeding back in real time into the device. Unfortunately, I still didn't work out why I couldn't putt, but I had lots of fun doing it. So that kind of shows the potential of what's possible with this platform. It's not a toy. It can be completely extensible. It can interact with other devices. You can do a lot of really complicated things on this. But the main thing is because you're developing on the same platform that you're running things on, and it's all this sort of feedback cycle is also instant. It just feels really powerful and almost magical. But don't just take my word for it. So Apple have run the Swift Student Challenge every year at WWDC for many years. The way that students can apply to this is by submitting a Swift Playground. And so this WWDC Scholars website has a collection of lots of people's projects which they've made public. Well worth checking out because people a lot more talented than me have done a lot more amazing things with Swift Playgrounds. And it's a really good resource to go and get inspiration and just see the kind of things which are possible. And also just see how talented lots of the students are. It's well worth checking out. And I'm sure you'll hear a lot more about that from Apple at WWDC. So where does that leave us? I've shown you kind of what's possible and what can be done. Xcode is obviously not going anywhere. You cannot just delete that from your Mac just yet and switch over to Swift Playgrounds. But in my mind, Swift Playgrounds is more the future than Xcode. Xcode is legacy software. As far as I'm aware, it's built with Objective-C and storyboards and all the things that no one really likes anymore. Whereas Playgrounds has been built from the ground up as a modern approach, Catalyst, so it works across these different devices, and is a lot more the future of the software and the way that Apple's going than Xcode. is. So just a quick show of hands. If someone was to start a new project today, who would start it with an Objective-C background, apart from Adam? Who would start a new project with storyboards as the main interface? And yeah, that's what Xcode, as far as I'm aware, has been built with. So sort of as a thought experiment, let's say Apple gave you a job today. You're now working for the tools team, the software development tools team. On one hand, you're given the option to work on a legacy project in Objective-C with storyboards. Your first 6 months are probably going to be triaging bugs from developers from the last 15 years of complaints and issues. Or you're given the chance to work on the Swift Playgrounds project, where the backlog of items is, each of them is probably a keynote-worthy slide for next year's WWDC. Which team are you going to choose? And I think that's ultimately why I think Playgrounds is going to be the future of development. That's the way things are definitely going, in my mind. And after all, it's only one checkbox away from appearing on the Vision Pro, right? It's that easy. Or at least it's going to be a lot easier for them to transition Playgrounds to the Vision Pro than it is to transition Xcode to the Vision Pro. And we heard yesterday in the session about the developer strap and how it being necessary to build and run from the Mac. You won't need that. Maybe that's the reason why Apple haven't released it on the Vision Pro yet, is because they're making so much money from the developer strap. But no, I think actually that'll put that out of business. But one of the issues that I see is just the connotation. Swift Playgrounds, people think of it as either an educational tool or a toy. It's not seen as a proper developer or development environment. So I have a suggestion for Apple as to what they might want to name the next version. And so maybe Swift Playgrounds isn't the future, maybe Xcode isn't the future, but Xcode HD is definitely where things are at going forwards. So I've given you some inspiration, hopefully, some context maybe you weren't aware of, some ideas to take away. Maybe next time you're starting a new project for yourself or as an experiment, maybe you'll reach for Swift Playgrounds as the next one. Next time you're going to try out a new idea or test some piece of code, maybe you can try doing that in Swift Playgrounds instead of a new project within Xcode. Or if you're just writing some documentation for your package or for internally, have a look at the workbook and how powerful that is. It really is a new way of doing things. Thank you very much.